My daughter reported me at school, but she had no idea just how wrong she was about everything. My 16-year-old daughter Faith told her principal I was a creepy stalker teacher last week. She wasn't wrong. I'd been watching her for 3 months, but not because I wanted to get into her pants. See, Faith didn't know I was her dad. Neither did I until a DNA site notification popped up on my phone in January. 17 years after a one-night stand, I suddenly had a daughter, but I was happy. I never had a family of my own growing up in foster care, and now I did. So I did what any rational person would. I applied for the substitute teacher opening at her school. My first day teaching her history class, I couldn't stop staring. She had my weird monkey ears and that same crooked smile where only one side goes up. She sat there doodling in her notebook instead of taking notes, exactly like I used to. I kept picking on her for questions, doing anything to chat with her, but that only made things worse. She grabbed her backpack and ran out the room instantly when the bell rang, telling her friend in the hallway, "The new sub is so weird." I agreed with her, but I couldn't help but feel so excited to learn more things about her. I just didn't expect to learn something terrible right off the bat. My daughter was getting bullied. I caught 3 girls pushing Faith under the stairwell, blocking her way. They tossed her sketchbook between them, laughing while she begged for it back. "Aw, look guys, she's crying," one of them mocked. I instantly saw red. "Give it back! Now!" I shouted. The entire hallway went silent. Teachers usually never screamed like that, but this was my daughter. But Faith looked mortified, like I was the bad guy for helping her. The girls dropped her sketchbook and scattered. She grabbed it and ran off without looking at me. I thought at the time that what I did was protection, so the next day in class, I rearranged the entire seating chart and moved her to the front, away from the bullies. But that only fueled the flame. During lunch, the girls approached Faith, giggling. "Oh my God, Faith, are you dating the substitute teacher? That's such a new low, even for you." Her face turned red. She ran out the cafeteria and started eating lunch in the bathroom, trying to avoid both her bullies and me. I didn't even realize how deep of a misunderstanding we had until the counselor pulled me aside and warned, "You know your student Faith? She's opened up about how uncomfortable you've made her. She says you watch her constantly. Follow her in the hallways in between classes. Please maintain appropriate boundaries or we'll have to let you go." I agreed and tried to keep my distance the rest of the week. But that Friday, I couldn't help it. The whole school gathered in the gymnasium for the school art show. I was excited watching Faith walk up to the microphone with a sculpture she'd been working on for months. This piece is called Inheritance, and it's about the things we get from the parent I wish I'd met. My chest tightened. She pulled the sheet off her sculpture and people gasped. It was beautiful. Delicate clay forming a tree with roots that spelled out questions like, how are we so connected yet so far apart? After her presentation, as she was walking back to her display spot, the girls approached and elbowed the sculpture until it wobbled, then crashed. The auditorium gasped. Faith stood frozen, staring at months of work shattered on the floor. The girl who'd done it covered her mouth in fake shock and yelled, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It was an accident." My daughter stood there trembling, tears filling her eyes. Without a second thought, I pushed through the crowd and jumped between Faith and those girls. "Step away from my daughter," I yelled. Suddenly the auditorium went silent. Faith just stared at me, and suddenly all my creepy behavior made sense. The staring wasn't stalking. It was a father trying to memorize 16 years of missed moments. "That's a cruel joke," my daughter said. I smiled softly. "It's not a joke. I'm your father." She glared at me. "Why? Why show up now when you've been absent my whole life?" "I think I can answer that," Faith's mother said, appearing from the crowd. "I told you growing up that your father didn't want you, but it's a lie. Your father, this man here, didn't even know about you. Because I hid you from him." She proceeded to explain how she panicked the night she found out she was pregnant and just ran off without telling me. "I thought you were both better off never meeting, but I was wrong." Her eyes started filling with tears. She bent down and picked up one of the broken pieces from the sculpture. And while it felt nice finally clearing my name, there was an even bigger problem. I took a deep breath and glared at the direction of the girls, clenching my hands into tight fists. Nobody moved. The whole gymnasium stayed frozen like someone hit pause on a movie. Hundreds of eyes bouncing between me and Faith, and the broken sculpture scattered across the floor. Faith's face shifted from shock to something worse, something that looked like I'd just stabbed her in front of everyone she knew. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out, and then she spun around and ran for the side exit, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. The door slammed behind her and the sound echoed through the silent gym. I started to follow, but the principal stepped directly into my path, his hand up like a traffic cop. His jaw was tight and his eyes weren't friendly anymore. I looked past him at the 3 girls who'd destroyed Faith's sculpture, and my hands curled into fists again, but the principal moved closer and blocked my view completely. The crowd started whispering, a low buzz that grew louder every second. Parents pulled out their phones. Students stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Faith's mother stood near the broken sculpture pieces, her face pale and her hands shaking. She bent down and picked up a clay fragment with roots spelling out one of Faith's questions. The principal cleared his throat and the whispers got quieter. He gestured toward the hallway and I knew what was coming before he said anything. Two security guards appeared from opposite sides of the gym, their radios crackling with static. The principal spoke quietly so only I could hear, telling me to step into the hallway while they handled the situation inside. I wanted to argue, but what could I say? I followed one guard out through the main doors and the other guard stayed behind. Through the narrow window in the door, I watched Faith's mother kneel by the sculpture pieces, carefully gathering fragments like they were made of glass instead of clay. The three girls got escorted to separate corners of the gymnasium by teachers who looked angry and confused. Students clustered in groups, pointing and whispering. Some were recording on their phones and my stomach twisted thinking about where those videos would end up. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, but now it mixed with something sicker. A cold feeling spreading through my chest about what I'd just done to Faith in front of her whole school. She'd spent months thinking I was a creepy stalker teacher, and I just confirmed it by making her the center of the biggest drama this school had probably seen all year. The guard stood next to me in the hallway, his arms crossed, not saying anything but watching me like I might bolt or attack someone. 20 minutes crawled by before the principal joined me in the hallway, closing the gymnasium door behind him. His voice was careful and measured, like he'd practiced what to say. He told me I needed to leave campus immediately and wait for HR to contact me. He didn't say I was fired, but the way he avoided looking at my eyes told me everything I needed to know. I was done here. Finished. My brief teaching career was over before it really started. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my substitute badge, the laminated card with my photo that I'd been so excited to get 3 months ago. I handed it over without arguing because what could I possibly say to defend myself? I'd shown up at a school event to watch a student I'd been making uncomfortable for months. I'd violated every boundary they'd warned me about. I'd caused a scene in front of hundreds of people. The principal took the badge and slipped it into his shirt pocket, then gestured toward the exit. I walked down the hallway past empty classrooms, my footsteps echoing off the lockers. Through the windows, I could see the parking lot and my car sitting under a streetlight. The late afternoon sun was setting and everything looked normal outside, like the world hadn't just collapsed in that gymnasium. I made it halfway across the parking lot before Faith's mother caught up with me, her shoes clicking fast on the pavement. She was breathing hard like she'd been running. We stood there between two cars in tense silence, neither of us sure what to say first. She pulled out her phone and asked for my number. I gave it to her and she typed it in, then sent me a text so I'd have hers. Her message was just a period, nothing else. She told me we needed to talk, but not today, not here, and definitely not around Faith until everyone calmed down. Her voice was tight and controlled, like she was holding back anger or tears or both. I agreed immediately and promised not to show up at the school again, not to contact Faith directly, not to make this any worse than I already had. She nodded once, a sharp movement, then turned and walked back toward the building. Her shoulders were tight and rigid, anger she was clearly holding back. I watched her disappear through the main entrance, and then I got in my car and sat there for 10 minutes before I could make myself turn the key. That evening, I sat on my couch staring at my laptop, refreshing my email every few minutes like that would make a difference. At 7:30, a message from the district HR department appeared in my inbox, and my stomach dropped before I even opened it. The subject line included the words, "Administrative leave," and I knew this was real. This was actually happening. I clicked it open and read through the formal language about a fact-finding meeting scheduled for 3 days from now. They wanted to review the incident and my conduct and determine appropriate next steps. The email was signed by someone named Sophia Pratt from Human Resources. I read it 5 times, looking for some hint of what they were going to decide. But it was all policy review and due process and professional language that told me nothing. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark thinking about Faith's face when she ran out of that gymnasium. The way she'd looked at me like I was the worst thing that ever happened to her. I spent 2 hours that night writing an apology text to Faith, trying to explain everything I was thinking and feeling. I wrote about finding out she existed, about growing up in foster care and never having a family, about being so excited to finally have someone who was mine. I wrote about watching her in class and wanting to protect her from those girls and not understanding why everything I did made things worse. When I finished and read it back, the whole thing was about me. My hurt, my fear, my excitement, my confusion. She didn't need my feelings dumped on her right now. She needed space, and maybe that was the first actually helpful thing I could give her. I deleted the whole text without sending it, and turned off my phone so I wouldn't be tempted to try again. The next morning, I woke up early and searched for DNA testing labs in the area. The Ancestry website had already told me what I needed to know, but I needed something official, something I could show Faith's mother when we talked, something that proved I wasn't some creepy guy making up a connection to justify stalking a teenager. I found a medical lab that did independent paternity tests and booked an appointment for 2 days from now. The online form asked if I wanted expedited results for an extra fee, and I clicked yes without thinking about the cost. The total came to $200, money I wasn't planning to spend, but it felt necessary. I got a confirmation email with the appointment details and instructions to bring a photo ID. I opened a new text message to Faith's mother and typed carefully, keeping it short and simple. I apologized for how I handled everything at the school and asked if we could meet somewhere neutral to talk without Faith present. I didn't make excuses or try to explain myself, just acknowledged that I messed up and wanted to understand her perspective. I hit send and then stared at my phone for 3 hours waiting for a response. It came at 2 in the afternoon, just the name of a coffee shop downtown and a time for tomorrow. I texted back confirming and she didn't respond again. The coffee shop was busy when I arrived, full of people working on laptops and meeting for lunch. I got there 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee I was too nervous to drink. Faith's mother showed up exactly on time, scanning the room until she spotted me at a corner table. She sat down across from me and we both just looked at each other for a minute, not sure where to start. Finally, she began talking, telling me the fuller story about finding out she was pregnant at 19. She'd panicked because we barely knew each other, just that one night after a party where we'd both been drinking too much. She convinced herself Faith would be better off without a father than with one who might resent being trapped by an accidental pregnancy. She thought she was protecting both of us by keeping the secret, protecting Faith from rejection, and protecting me from obligation. I listened without interrupting, watching her hands shake slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. For the first time, I understood that she was scared too, that this wasn't about punishing me, but about her own fear of messing up her kid's life. She'd been 19 and alone and terrified, making the best choice she could see at the time. I told her I understood and I meant it, even though it still hurt knowing I'd missed 16 years. That afternoon, another email from the district arrived, this one shorter and more direct. It confirmed the HR meeting date and time, then included a formal directive that I was not to contact Faith at the school or attempt any communication with her directly. The words "no contact order" jumped out at me and felt like someone punching me in the gut. I couldn't text her, couldn't call her, couldn't show up anywhere she might be. I forwarded the email to Faith's mother so she'd know I was taking it seriously, that I understood the boundaries they were setting. She texted back 3 hours later with just 2 words, "Thank you," and nothing else. I drove through my old neighborhood that evening, past the 3 different foster homes I lived in between ages 8 and 15. The first one was a yellow house with peeling paint that still had the same broken porch light. The second was a brick duplex where I shared a room with 2 other boys and learned to sleep with my backpack under my pillow. I parked outside the last one, a gray ranch house with bars on the windows, and just sat there staring at the front door. I remembered how it felt to never know if I'd still be there next month, how I learned to keep my stuff ready to go just in case. The social worker would show up without warning and I'd have 15 minutes to pack. That's when it hit me that my whole protect or bust reaction to Faith wasn't really about her. It was about that scared kid who never had anyone show up for him and now couldn't stop showing up even when it was hurting the person he was trying to help. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and then I drove home. The DNA test appointment went quickly 2 days later, just a cheek swab and paperwork in a small clinic that smelled like cleaning products. The lab tech walked me through the process without making eye contact, probably used to people coming in for tests they hoped would prove something. They told me results would be ready in 5 business days, and I signed the forms with shaking hands. I added Faith's mother to the contact list for receiving results because I wanted her to see them at the same time I did. No secrets this time. The tech handed me a receipt and told me they'd email when the results were ready. Walking out of the clinic into the parking lot, I felt this weird mix of relief and worry because soon this would be officially confirmed and there wouldn't be any more room for doubt or denial. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before driving away. I texted Faith's mother that afternoon, offering to pay for materials to rebuild the sculpture. She responded immediately that any money needs to come with 0 strings attached. She explained that Faith was already feeling like a charity case and didn't want to owe me anything, which hurt, but made sense. I typed back that I agreed to her terms, and she said she'd think about whether Faith would even accept it. I stared at my phone waiting for her to say more, but she didn't text again. I wanted to push back and explain that I just wanted to help fix what got broken, but I deleted the message before sending it. Hassan's voice was already in my head telling me this wasn't about what I wanted. The HR meeting with Sophia Pratt happened 3 days later in a small conference room at the district office. She was already sitting at the table when I arrived, a stack of papers in front of her and reading glasses on. She didn't waste time on friendly small talk or asking how I was doing. She walked me through every policy I broke, watching my face carefully, asking me to explain my thinking at each decision point. I was honest about everything, about finding out Faith was my daughter through a DNA site, about taking the substitute job without telling anyone, about all the ways I told myself crossing boundaries was okay because I thought I was protecting her. With each thing I admitted, I watched her write notes in the margins of her papers that probably spelled the end of my teaching career. She asked why I didn't report the relationship to the principal when I first found out, and I had no good answer for that. At the end of the meeting, Sophia told me I was removed from the substitute list right away while they finished their investigation. She explained that even if everything I was saying was true about being Faith's father, my behavior created an unsafe situation for a student and broke multiple district policies. She also warned me that showing up on campus for any reason could result in getting arrested for being somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. Suddenly, the weight of what I'd lost hit me all at once. I nodded and signed the papers she pushed across the table and walked out to my car feeling like I'd just been punched in the stomach. I sat there in the parking lot for an hour before I could drive home. Faith's mother called that evening and told me Faith said clearly she wants zero contact with me right now. She was processing everything and needed space, and any talking has to go through her mother first. I agreed right away because what else could I do, and I thanked her for being willing to be the go-between, even though I knew this was extra work she didn't ask for. She was quiet for a minute, and then told me Faith was struggling and needed time to figure out how she felt. I said I understood, and we hung up. I spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling in my bedroom, thinking about all the ways I'd messed this up. By the end of the week, rumors were spreading online through parent Facebook groups and student social media. Faith's mother texted me screenshots showing someone was calling me a predator who went after a student on purpose. The story was getting twisted into something way darker than what actually happened. Parents were commenting that I should be arrested, and students were sharing posts calling me creepy and dangerous. Faith's mother texted me not to respond or try to defend myself because it would only make things worse. So I watched my name get destroyed in real time and did nothing. I turned off notifications on my phone because seeing them pop up was making me feel sick. I wanted to scream at all these people who didn't know what really happened, but I kept my mouth shut. Faith's mother called again 2 days later and described Faith's view of everything, how confused and hurt she was. She explained that Faith spent months thinking I was a creepy teacher, only to find out I'm her father. Faith wasn't ready to hear my side of the story yet, because she was still trying to deal with the basic fact that I existed. I listened and felt this heavy sadness settle in my chest, not for my job or my name being trashed online, but for all the years we didn't have and the terrible way we finally met. Faith's mother said Faith kept asking why I didn't just tell her the truth from the start, instead of watching her like that. I had no good answer for that either. We talked for almost an hour, and by the end I felt exhausted and empty. I booked an appointment with Hassan Bernard, a therapist who works with trauma and family problems. The first open time slot was 4 days away, and I spent those days barely sleeping, playing back every interaction with Faith and seeing all the moments I should have handled differently. I kept thinking about her face when I yelled in the gym, how she looked at me like I was the problem. When I finally sat in Hassan's office and told him everything, he listened without judging me, and then asked me what I was really trying to protect Faith from. I started to say the bullies, but then stopped because that wasn't the whole truth. I realized I was trying to protect her from feeling as alone as I always felt, from being the kid nobody showed up for. Hassan nodded like he'd heard this before, and wrote something in his notebook. In our first full session the next week, Hassan challenged what he called my rescuer story, pointing out that I was trying to save Faith from a situation she never asked me to save her from. He gave me what he called a pause plan. 3 questions I have to ask myself before taking any action involving Faith. Does this help her needs or mine? Have I been invited to help? Am I respecting her choices? The questions felt way too simple and way too accurate at the same time. I wanted to argue that protecting your kid is different, but Hassan just looked at me and asked if Faith was really my kid yet, or if I was forcing that relationship before she was ready. I didn't have an answer for that. We scheduled another session for the following week, and I left his office feeling like my brain had been turned inside out. The email from the school arrived 3 days later with the subject line, "Witness Statement Request, Bullying Investigation." I opened it sitting at my kitchen table and read through the formal language about providing a written account of what I observed. They wanted facts, dates, specific details about the incidents under the stairwell and at the art show. I spent 2 hours writing it out, describing exactly what I saw without adding my opinions or making myself sound like some kind of hero. Just the facts about 3 girls blocking Faith's path, tossing her sketchbook around, the mocking voices. Then the art show, the sculpture getting knocked over, the fake apology. Writing it all down in plain language made me realize how much I'd been telling myself a story where I was the good guy swooping in to save the day. The actual events looked different on paper, more complicated, and letting the school handle it without me trying to control the outcome felt uncomfortable but necessary. I submitted the statement through the online portal and closed my laptop, forcing myself not to check my email every 5 minutes for a response. Faith's mother called me the next evening while I was making dinner. She told me Faith was struggling with whether to file her own formal complaint against the girls because she was scared of what would happen after. The girls might come after her harder. Kids at the school might think she was making a big deal out of nothing. The whole thing might blow up again just when things were starting to calm down. My first instinct was to argue that Faith needed to report it, that staying silent would only make the bullies think they could get away with it. But I caught myself before the words came out, and instead told her mother I understood why Faith was scared. Fear of retaliation was real, and Faith had to make her own choice about what felt safe for her. Her mother was quiet for a second, and then said that was probably the most helpful thing I could have said. We talked for another 10 minutes about how to support Faith without pushing her, and when I hung up I felt this weird mix of frustration and pride. Frustration because I wanted to fix it. Pride because I'd actually managed to respect Faith's choice even when every part of me disagreed with it. A guy named Jude Armstrong called me a few days later, introducing himself as a restorative justice facilitator who worked with the school district. His voice was calm and careful, like he was used to talking to people who were upset or defensive. He explained that the district was considering a restorative justice conference as part of their response to what happened at the art show, bringing together the students involved to talk about harm and repair. He was very clear that it wasn't about forcing anyone to forgive each other or guaranteeing any specific outcome, just creating space for honest conversation about what happened and what people needed to move forward. He asked if I'd be interested in participating, and I told him yes, but only if Faith wanted me there. I explained that this whole situation started because I kept inserting myself where I wasn't invited, and I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Jude seemed to appreciate that and said he'd talk to Faith and her mother first before moving forward with anything. Faith's mother texted me later that week saying she and Faith had attended an information session about the restorative justice process. They sat in a conference room with Jude and another facilitator who explained how it would work, what kind of questions would be asked, what the goals were. Afterward, Faith told her mother she was thinking about it but wasn't ready to commit yet. She was overwhelmed by everything happening at once, the investigation, the online rumors, kids at the school talking about her, and now this whole conference idea. Faith needed time to figure out what she actually wanted versus what everyone else thought she should want. I texted back telling her mother to let Faith take all the time she needed, and I meant it, even though waiting felt impossible. Every day that passed was another day Faith was dealing with this mess. Another day those girls weren't being held accountable. Another day I couldn't do anything to help. But Hassan's voice was in my head reminding me that my discomfort with waiting wasn't Faith's problem to solve. 2 weeks after the art show incident, Sophia called me in for a follow-up meeting at the district office. I drove there knowing this probably wasn't good news, and when I sat down across from her in that same small conference room, her expression confirmed it. She told me the investigation was wrapping up, and the district was leaning toward recommending my termination from the substitute list. She walked through all the policy violations again, explaining that even though my intentions might have been good, my conduct created an unsafe environment for a student. Then she offered me another option. I could resign instead of being terminated, which would avoid a formal hearing and look better on my record if I wanted to work in education again someday. She slid a piece of paper across the table with the resignation option outlined in bullet points. I stared at it knowing this was a choice between fighting to clear my name and accepting that fighting would just drag Faith through more public scrutiny. If I pushed for a hearing, Faith would probably have to testify. The whole story would get picked apart again, and she'd be stuck reliving the worst parts of this while I tried to prove I wasn't as bad as everyone thought. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. I went home that afternoon and wrote my resignation letter sitting at my kitchen table. It took me 45 minutes to write 3 paragraphs saying I was resigning effective immediately and thanking them for the opportunity to work in the district. I didn't make excuses or try to explain myself, just kept it short and professional. When I hit send on the email to Sophia, I felt this thin wave of relief mixed with sadness. Relief because at least I was making one decision that actually put Faith's needs first instead of mine. Sadness because my brief teaching career was over before it really started, and I'd never get another chance to stand in front of a classroom and help kids learn history. Sophia responded within an hour with a formal acknowledgement, and that was it. No hearing, no final meeting, just done. The DNA results came back on a Thursday morning while I was sitting in my car outside the grocery store. I opened the email on my phone, and even though I already knew what it would say, seeing it in official language with percentages and genetic markers made it real in a new way. Probability of paternity 99.9%. I forwarded the results to Faith's mother, and then just sat there in the parking lot crying for 20 minutes. Not sad crying, but this overwhelming mix of grief and relief and fear, all hitting me at once. Grief for all the years I missed, relief that it was finally confirmed and official, fear about what came next. Faith's mother called me an hour later and her voice was soft and careful when she said she was sorry. Sorry for all the years I missed. Sorry it had to come out the way it did. Sorry for the mess we were all trying to navigate now. We talked for almost an hour about what happens next, how to build some kind of relationship between me and Faith, what boundaries needed to be in place, how to handle holidays and birthdays and all the normal parent stuff that felt impossible right now. For the first time, it felt like we might actually be able to figure this out as adults instead of as scared kids playing defense. I waited 2 days before asking Faith's mother if Faith would be willing to meet me briefly in a public place with no pressure or expectations. I typed and deleted the text message 3 times before finally sending it, prepared for her to say no and trying to be okay with that. She responded that afternoon saying she'd ask Faith and see what she said. I spent the next 2 days barely sleeping, checking my phone constantly, imagining all the ways Faith might say no or all the conditions she might put on saying yes. When Faith's mother finally texted that Faith agreed to one short meeting at a coffee shop downtown, 30 minutes maximum, I had to read it twice to make sure I understood correctly. Faith was willing to meet me, actually sit down and talk to me. I spent those 2 days until the meeting alternating between excitement and terror, playing out every possible conversation in my head and trying to prepare myself not to mess it up again. Faith's mother called me the morning of the meeting to set ground rules. We stay in the coffee shop where it's public and other people are around. We stick to the 30-minute limit no matter how well or badly it's going. We focus on one topic at a time instead of trying to solve everything at once. No big emotional declarations, no pushing for more than Faith is ready to give, no making promises about the future. I agreed to all of it and thanked her for being willing to facilitate this. I showed up 15 minutes early and ordered a coffee I was too nervous to drink, sitting at a table near the window where Faith would be able to see me when she walked in. When Faith and her mother came through the door, Faith looked smaller than she did at the school. Her shoulders hunched forward like she was trying to make herself invisible. She was wearing an oversized hoodie and had her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I had to remind myself not to stare, to let her come to the table at her own pace, to respect the space between us. The first meeting was awkward and stilted, Faith sitting down across from me with her arms crossed tight over her chest, while her mother sat between us like a referee ready to call fouls. Faith didn't look at me at first, just stared at the table and picked at her thumbnail. When she finally did look up, her face was guarded but her eyes were direct and clear. She asked why I took the substitute job at her school, and why I kept staring at her in class. Her voice was quiet but steady, like she'd practiced these questions and wasn't going to let me dodge them. I answered as honestly as I could, telling her I was trying to learn everything about her all at once because I was scared of losing time I'd already lost. I explained that when I found out I had a daughter, I panicked and made bad choices because I didn't know how to handle it. I told her I should have found a better way to reach out, should have gone through her mother first, should have thought about what she needed instead of what I wanted. I listened more than I talked because Hassan's voice was in my head, reminding me this wasn't about me. This was about Faith getting answers and deciding whether she wanted me in her life at all. When Faith stops talking and looks down at her coffee cup, I take a breath and tell her I'm sorry for how I showed up at her school. I apologize for making her uncomfortable, for not thinking about what she needed, for handling everything so badly. I don't make excuses about being excited to meet her or wanting to protect her. I just own that I messed up and made her feel unsafe in a place where she should have felt normal. She doesn't say it's okay because it's not, but she nods once, barely moving her head, and that small movement feels like more than I deserve right now. Her mother watches both of us carefully, her hand wrapped around her own coffee cup. The silence stretches out for maybe 30 seconds before Faith starts talking again, her voice quieter but steady. She tells me about the sculpture and how much it meant to her, how she'd been working on it for months after school in the art room. She explains that it was her way of processing feelings about having a father she'd never met, questions she'd been carrying around since she was old enough to understand that other kids had dads who showed up to things. She describes the shame of having it destroyed in front of everyone, the gasps from the crowd, the way the clay pieces scattered across the gymnasium floor. Then she looks right at me and says, I made it worse by causing a scene, by making her personal family stuff into public drama that everyone would talk about for weeks. Her anger is sharp and clear, not yelling but direct, and I sit there absorbing every word without defending myself or trying to explain my side. She has every right to be angry at me. I pick at the edge of my napkin and force myself to stay quiet and just listen. When she finishes talking, I wait a few seconds to make sure she's done before I speak. I offer again to pay for materials to rebuild the sculpture, to help her get the clay and tools she needs to start over. Faith cuts me off before I can finish the sentence. She tells me she doesn't want to be rescued or fixed or turned into my project to feel better about myself. Her mother puts a hand on her arm, but Faith shakes her head and keeps going. She says she needs me to hear this, that she spent her whole life fine without a father and doesn't need one who treats her like a problem he has to solve. The words hurt, but they're completely true, and I tell her I understand, and I'm sorry. I promise I won't try to fix things for her anymore, that I'll respect whatever boundaries she sets. Her mother gives me a small nod like maybe I'm finally starting to get it. We sit there for another few minutes in awkward silence before Faith says she needs to go, that 30 minutes is enough for today. I thank them both for meeting me and watch them leave through the coffee shop door. I sit there alone for another 10 minutes staring at my cold coffee and thinking about everything Faith said. That night I can't sleep, so I pull out my laptop and start searching for community art programs in our area. I find a studio downtown that offers scholarships for teen artists, classes on weekends and after school, access to equipment and materials. I read through their website 3 times, making sure it's legitimate and not some scam. I draft a text to Faith's mother with the link and a note explaining it's not a handout, just a resource Faith can apply for if she's interested. I rewrite the message 4 times, trying to make it clear I'm not trying to control anything or push my way in. I finally send it around midnight and then force myself to put my phone face down on the nightstand so I'm not checking it every 5 seconds. Her mother texts back the next morning saying she'll mention it to Faith without any pressure, and I have to practice being okay with that being enough. I want to ask follow-up questions, want to know when she'll tell Faith and what Faith's reaction is, but I don't. I just respond with a simple thanks and leave it alone. The next afternoon, I call the studio to make sure the scholarship information on their website is current and accurate. I'm careful not to mention Faith's name or try to put my thumb on the scale in any way. The coordinator who answers is friendly and patient, walking me through their application process and explaining that they review applications twice a year. I ask about the timeline and the requirements, taking notes on a scrap of paper. She tells me they're looking for students who are serious about art, but might not have access to resources, exactly what Faith needs. I thank her for her time and hang up feeling like maybe I'm finally learning how to support Faith without trying to control everything about her life. It's a small thing, but it feels like progress, like I'm starting to understand what Hassan meant about respecting agency. I put the notes in a folder and don't text Faith's mother about the call, because she doesn't need updates on every little thing I do. 3 days later, Faith's mother calls while I'm on my lunch break at the warehouse. She tells me the school has issued suspensions for 2 of the girls who bullied Faith and put the third one on a behavior contract. The girl who actually knocked over the sculpture got 2 weeks out of school, the longest suspension. But Faith's mother sounds tired and frustrated when she explains it, like she knows 2 weeks isn't going to change anything real. I agree that it's not enough, but at least it's something. At least the school took it seriously. We both sit with how weak that sounds, how little institutional responses actually do to fix the harm that was done. She tells me Faith watched the girls get called out of class and felt a mix of relief and anxiety, scared they'd come back angrier. I ask if there's anything Faith needs and she says not right now, just time and space. I tell her I understand and we hang up. I go back to loading boxes onto pallets and try not to think about those girls coming back to the school in 2 weeks. The hallway whispers and social media comments keep going for weeks after that. Faith's mother calls again to tell me Faith started seeing the school counselor twice a week to deal with the worry and stress. Faith is having trouble sleeping some nights and doesn't want to go to the school on bad days, mornings where she sits in the car in the parking lot trying to make herself walk through the doors. Faith's mother sounds exhausted herself, like she's carrying all of Faith's fear on top of her own guilt about keeping me secret for so many years. I feel completely helpless knowing I can't fix any of this, and probably made it worse by showing up the way I did. All I can do is ask if there's anything Faith needs, any way I can help from a distance. Her mother says not right now, that Faith needs time to work through everything with the counselor before adding more complicated feelings about me into the mix. I accept that even though it hurts, even though every part of me wants to do something to make it better right now. Hassan helps me write out a formal promise to myself during our next session. It's about not going to Faith's school or trying to make situations happen where I might run into her by accident. We work on the exact words together, making sure they're specific enough to actually mean something. I sign it with a pen, and Hassan gives me a copy to take home. I tape it to my bathroom mirror where I'll see it every single morning when I'm brushing my teeth, a reminder that respecting boundaries is something I have to choose to do every day. Hassan explains that this kind of self-binding is how we stop ourselves from falling back into old patterns when we're stressed or scared. He tells me the pledge is a tool to interrupt the automatic response to protect and control, to give me a pause before I act. I'm starting to believe him, starting to see how the pause actually helps me make better choices. 2 weeks after that, Jude Armstrong reaches out through email, asking if I'd be willing to write a short impact statement for the record. He's careful to explain it's not something that would be read out loud in a conference, just something for documentation purposes to capture my perspective on what happened. I spend 3 days writing and rewriting it, trying to be honest about my mistakes without making it all about my own hurt feelings. The first version is too defensive, full of excuses about not knowing how to be a father. The second version is too apologetic, like I'm begging for forgiveness. The third version finally gets it right. 2 paragraphs about wanting to protect Faith and not understanding that protection without permission is just another form of control. I explain that I crossed boundaries because I was scared of losing time with her, but that fear doesn't excuse making her uncomfortable or unsafe. I send it to Jude and feel relieved to have it done, to have put my mistakes into clear words that I can't take back or revise later. Faith and her mother attend a pre-conference meeting with Jude the following week to talk about what a restorative justice conference might look like. Faith's mother calls me afterward while I'm driving home from work, and I pull over to take the call properly. She tells me Faith is scared but also curious, wanting to understand why those girls targeted her, but not sure she can handle being in the same room with them. They talked through different formats and safety measures, ways to make sure Faith feels protected during the conversation. Faith asked a lot of questions about what would happen if she got too upset, or if the girls said something cruel. Jude apparently handled it well, giving Faith control over the process and making it clear she could stop any time. They decided to take more time before committing to anything, to let Faith think about whether this is something she actually wants or just something adults think would be good for her. I tell her mother that whatever Faith decides is the right choice, that I trust her to know what she needs. Her mother thanks me for saying that, and we hang up. I sit in my parked car for a few minutes, feeling grateful that Faith has people around her who are letting her make her own decisions about her own healing. A few days later, Jude calls me to share something from the pre-conference meetings, and I pull over to take the call properly. He tells me Roxana Molina, the mother of the girl who knocked over the sculpture, attended her own session where she talked about family stress and money problems, and her daughter acting out. Jude explains he got permission to share this with me because understanding context helps everyone see the full picture, even though it doesn't excuse what happened. I listen carefully and feel something weird happening in my chest, something that might be empathy for Roxana, even though I'm still angry at her daughter. The complexity of feeling both things at once feels more honest than just wanting to blame someone, and I tell Jude I appreciate him sharing it. He says the process works better when everyone can see each other as full people, instead of just good guys and bad guys, and I hang up thinking about how much easier it would be if things were simple. The next week, Faith's mother calls after another session and tells me Faith agreed to hear what Roxana has to say, but made it very clear she's not interested in forgiving anyone right now. Jude apparently confirmed that forgiveness isn't required for this process, just willingness to stay in the room and listen to what people have to say. Faith's mother sounds impressed when she tells me Faith sat through the whole thing without leaving, even when it got uncomfortable and she wanted to run. She says that staying present even when it was hard was its own kind of strength, and I feel proud of Faith in a way that has nothing to do with me. I thank her for the update, and we hang up, and I sit there thinking about how Faith is handling this better than I would have at her age. That same week, I start volunteering at a community center that runs after-school programs for elementary kids. I fill out the application online and go through a background check, and they call me 2 days later asking if I can start on Monday. The work is straightforward, helping kids with homework and art projects, supervising the playground during outdoor time. It's not about watching over Faith or trying to recreate what I lost with her. It's about putting my protective energy into something useful and appropriate. The kids actually want help, asking me questions about their math worksheets and showing me their drawings, and I'm not crossing any boundaries to give it. A second grader named Jake spends an hour making a clay turtle with me, his tongue sticking out while he concentrates, and the satisfaction I feel is different from anything I experienced substitute teaching. These kids don't know anything about my mistakes, and I get to just be a regular volunteer helping out. The work is tiring but good, and I leave each day feeling like I did something right instead of something wrong. 3 weeks into volunteering, Faith's mother texts asking if I want to meet at the coffee shop again, and this time there's no mention of time limits or ground rules. I show up nervous but hopeful, ordering the same coffee I can't drink because my hands are shaking. Faith walks in alone this time, no mother between us, and slides into the seat across from me looking less guarded than before. We talk about art techniques and different types of clay, and I pull out my phone to show her a photo of a sculpture I made in high school. It's rough and unbalanced, the base way too heavy for the delicate top part, and I point this out to her. I tell her she got my weird ears, but also my tendency to make things bottom heavy, always worried about stuff falling over. She almost smiles when I say that, just one corner of her mouth going up in that crooked way, and it's the first time I've seen any resemblance to me that isn't painful. We talk for 40 minutes about her classes and the studio and my volunteer work, and it feels almost normal, almost like what I imagined when I first found out I had a daughter. When she gets up to leave, she says thanks for the coffee, and I watch her walk out feeling lighter than I have in months. 2 days later, a certified letter arrives from the district with the final HR outcome. I sign for it and open it in my car, reading the formal language carefully. The letter says I'm not allowed to work in any district school for 1 year, but there won't be any formal charges or notation of misconduct on my teaching license. It's better than I expected, and worse than I hoped. A middle ground that acknowledges I messed up without destroying my future completely. I fold the letter and put it in my glove box, then sit there for a few minutes processing what this means. I'm relieved there's no permanent mark, but the 1-year ban feels like a long time to be shut out. That evening, I start looking at job listings online, scrolling through pages of warehouse positions and retail openings and delivery driver jobs. I apply for a warehouse position at a distribution center the next morning, filling out the application honestly about why I left my last job. They call me 3 days later for an interview, and I show up in clean clothes ready to explain everything. The supervisor asks about the gap in my work history, and I tell him the truth, that I made mistakes at a teaching job and resigned. He nods slowly and asks if I'm reliable and can lift 50 pounds, and I say yes to both. He hires me on the spot, telling me to come in Monday for training, and I leave feeling grateful for a second chance. The work is physical and straightforward, loading trucks and managing inventory, scanning boxes and moving pallets around the warehouse floor. There's something relieving about a job where I can't accidentally hurt anyone by caring too much, where the work is just work and nothing personal. My coworkers are friendly but not nosy, making small talk about sports and weekend plans without asking about my past. They don't know anything about what happened at the school, and I'm grateful for the anonymity and the chance to just be a regular person doing a regular job. I come home tired every day, but in a good way, muscles sore from lifting instead of brain tired from worrying. Around this same time, Faith's mother calls with news that makes her voice sound excited. She tells me Faith decided to apply for the studio scholarship on her own, filling out the whole application and writing the required essay without asking for help from anyone. Faith's mother explains that Faith is taking back her artistic identity, separate from the trauma of the destroyed sculpture, making art about herself instead of about what happened to her. I feel proud hearing this, even though I had nothing to do with her decision, proud that she's choosing to move forward on her own terms, instead of waiting for permission. I tell her mother to let Faith know I'm proud of her, and she promises she will, and we hang up with me feeling hopeful about Faith's future. The warehouse work settles into a routine over the next few weeks, and I find myself actually enjoying the simple rhythm of it. Clock in, load trucks, take lunch, finish the shift, clock out. No drama, no emotional complications, just honest work that pays the bills. Hassan tells me in our next session that this kind of stability is good for me, that having structure without intensity helps me practice better boundaries. 2 weeks after Faith applied for the scholarship, Jude calls to tell me the conference is officially scheduled. He explains Faith will bring a shard of her broken sculpture to use as a focal point during the discussion, something physical to help everyone stay grounded when conversations get difficult. I listen carefully as he walks through the format and expectations, how everyone will have a chance to speak and be heard. Faith's mother calls later that evening and asks if I want to know how it goes, and I tell her yes, but only if Faith is okay with her sharing. She says she'll check with Faith first, and I thank her for respecting that boundary, another small practice in doing things right. The day of the conference arrives and I go to work like normal, trying not to think about what's happening at the school. Faith's mother promised to call afterward if Faith agrees to it, so I focus on loading trucks and moving boxes and not checking my phone every 5 minutes. My shift ends at 4, and I drive home in silence, no music, just the sound of traffic and my own breathing. I eat dinner standing at my kitchen counter, still waiting for the phone to ring. Finally at 7:30, Faith's mother calls and I answer on the first ring. She tells me the conference happened with Faith, the 3 girls, their parents, a school administrator, and Jude running the whole thing. One of the girls admitted to elbowing the sculpture on purpose, her voice quiet but clear. But the ringleader tried to minimize it as an accident even with everyone watching. Faith's mother sounds frustrated when she describes this part, how the girl's parents jumped in trying to defend her. But Jude and the administrator held firm and didn't let anyone dodge responsibility. Faith got to say directly how much the destruction hurt her and why their cruelty mattered, reading from notes she'd prepared ahead of time. Faith's mother tells me Faith's voice shook, but she got through it, and when she finished the room was silent for a long moment. The conference ended with written agreements that everyone had to sign. The girls have to complete 20 hours of community service each, help fundraise for art supplies for the school, and attend a 3-week empathy workshop on Saturdays. No one got expelled, which frustrates Faith's mother because she wanted harsher consequences. She tells me Jude explained that holding people accountable while also educating them is more effective than pure punishment, that the goal is changing behavior, not just making people suffer. I tell her I trust the process, even though I wish there were clearer consequences, and I mean it, even though part of me still wants those girls to suffer the way Faith suffered. We talk for another 10 minutes about how Faith seemed after it was over, and Faith's mother says she was exhausted but also relieved, like she'd been carrying something heavy and finally got to put it down. I thank her for calling and for everything she's doing to help Faith through this, and she says we're doing it together now, which makes my throat tight. After we hang up, I sit on my couch in the dark apartment thinking about how far we've all come from that terrible day in the gymnasium. The road ahead is still long and complicated, but at least we're all moving forward instead of staying stuck in that frozen moment of shattered clay and broken trust. A few days later, an email from Jude arrives with the subject line saying Conference Outcomes Summary. I open it at my kitchen table and read through the 2-page document twice, taking in every detail about the agreements the girls signed and the hours they committed to. The words blur together on the second read because I'm not really processing anymore, just holding the information like something fragile. I save the file to a folder on my laptop and close it, resisting the urge to forward it to Faith or text her mother asking follow-up questions. This was Faith's process, and I was on the edges where I belonged, not in the center demanding updates. I pick up my phone and type out a simple message to her mother instead. I hope it brought Faith some peace. 3 dots appear and disappear twice before a single heart emoji comes through as her response. No words, just that small red heart, and I set my phone down feeling like maybe that's enough for now. 2 weeks pass before Faith's mother calls and suggests we set up a regular phone schedule to talk about co-parenting stuff. She explains that having a set time each month will keep us from putting Faith in the middle or making her relay messages between us. I agree immediately, and we pick the first Tuesday of every month at 7 in the evening. Our first call happens on a rainy Tuesday, and I sit on my couch with a notepad, feeling weirdly formal about the whole thing. The conversation starts awkward with both of us not sure what to say first. She brings up holidays and asks what I'm thinking for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I tell her I don't have expectations, that we should do whatever feels right for Faith. We spend 40 minutes working through basic agreements about sharing information when Faith has important school events or doctor appointments, about not making promises to Faith without checking with each other first, about giving each other heads up if one of us needs to change plans. It feels boring and practical in the best possible way, like we're building something stable instead of dramatic. When we hang up, I write down our agreements in my notebook so I don't forget, and the act of writing them makes them feel more real and solid. 3 months slide by in a pattern of warehouse shifts and therapy appointments and quiet evenings in my apartment. I'm loading boxes onto a truck on a Wednesday afternoon when my phone buzzes in my pocket. I finished stacking the current load before pulling it out and checking the screen. Faith sent me a photo with no message attached. The image shows a small clay piece sitting on a wooden table, maybe 4 inches tall, with rough edges and visible fingerprints in the surface. I zoom in and study every detail, the way the clay curves and the texture of the unglazed surface. 10 minutes pass while I stand there in the warehouse staring at this photo of my daughter's art. My supervisor walks by and asks if I'm okay, and I tell him yes, just got some good news. I open a text response and type out several versions before settling on something simple. That's beautiful. I'm glad you're making art again. I hit send before I can second guess it or add questions or push for more information about where she made it or what it means or when I might see her next piece. 2 hours crawl by while I finish my shift and drive home and make dinner. My phone finally buzzes while I'm washing dishes. Faith's response is just one word. Thanks. I dry my hands and read that single word 5 times, looking for hidden meaning or emotion in those 6 letters. The urge to respond immediately hits hard, to ask how the studio is going or if she's working on other pieces, or if she wants to meet up again soon. Hassan's voice plays in my head, reminding me about letting Faith control the pace. I set my phone on the counter and go back to washing dishes, leaving the conversation where it ended naturally, instead of forcing it to continue. It's hard, but it's getting easier with practice, this whole shutting up and waiting thing. Thursday morning, I drive to Hassan's office for my weekly appointment. We settle into our usual spots, and he asks how the past week went. I tell him about the photo Faith sent, and how I managed not to blow up her phone with follow-up messages. He nods and says that's good progress, then shifts gears to talking about my trigger responses. He wants to rehearse a detailed plan for handling future situations where I might see Faith getting hurt or disrespected at public events. We spend 30 minutes mapping out the pause protocol, the 3 questions I have to ask myself before taking action. Does this serve her needs or mine? Have I been invited to help? Am I respecting her agency? Hassan makes me repeat them until I can say them without looking at my notes. Then we role-play different scenarios, him describing situations while I practice my responses. In one scenario, Faith is at a public art show, and someone makes a mean comment about her work. Instead of jumping in to defend her, I practice calling her mother first and asking if Faith needs support. In another scenario, I see Faith looking upset at a coffee shop. Instead of approaching her directly, I practice texting to ask if she's okay and waiting for her response. We run through 5 different situations until I can get through them, without my hands shaking or my voice getting tight. Building competence to replace panic, Hassan calls it. The next afternoon, I'm at home when Faith's mother calls, her voice higher and more excited than usual. She tells me the community studio awarded Faith a partial scholarship that covers half the cost of weekend practice hours. Faith has to commit to showing up every Saturday for 3 months to keep it, but it's a real opportunity. I congratulate her and feel this weird warmth in my chest that has nothing to do with me being involved. I ask her to tell Faith I'm proud of her when she gets a chance. She promises she will, and we talk for a few more minutes about the logistics before hanging up. I sit on my couch afterward just feeling this quiet satisfaction about Faith taking steps forward with her art, about her getting recognized for her talent, about her having access to resources that will help her grow. It's the first time I've felt proud of her in a way that doesn't involve me trying to rescue or fix or protect her. A week later, Faith's mother texts me a screenshot of a social media post from one of the girls who bullied Faith. The post is vague, something about fake people and karma, but the timing and tone make it feel like it might be targeting Faith again. My stomach drops and I start typing out a response asking if we should report it, but I delete it and wait. Faith's mother texts again an hour later saying the school already called the girl in and reinforced the behavior contract she signed. This time there's no pile-on from other students, no wave of comments supporting the mean post. Faith's mother tells me Faith was stressed about it for a day, but then it passed, that the quick response from the school helped her feel safer than before. I text back that I'm glad they handled it fast and leave it at that, not pushing for more details or offering to get involved. Late one evening, I drive to Faith's high school and park in the empty lot. The building is dark except for security lights, and I walk around to the side door that leads to the gymnasium. It's unlocked and I slip inside, the space echoing and huge without people filling it. I climb up into the bleachers and sit in roughly the same spot where I watched Faith present her sculpture months ago. The floor below still has the taped-off squares where student art was displayed. I pull out my journal and start writing about inheritance as presence without possession, about learning to be Faith's father in whatever limited way she allows, instead of demanding the full relationship I missed. The words come slowly, and some of them are messy and unclear, but getting them on paper helps. I write about the difference between showing up and showing off, between protection and control, between love and ownership. An hour passes before I close the journal and head back to my car, feeling lighter than I have in months. Faith texts me 2 weeks later asking if I want to get coffee again. No mention of time limits or her mother coming along, just her choosing to spend time with me. We meet at the same coffee shop downtown on a Saturday afternoon. This time when she walks in, she doesn't look as guarded, her shoulders a little less tight. We order drinks and sit at a corner table, and she asks me about my foster care years, why I never got adopted, what it was like moving between homes. I share one story about a foster mom named Rena, who taught me to make grilled cheese sandwiches when I was 12, keeping it light and specific instead of dumping all my trauma on her. I describe how Rena showed me the trick of buttering the bread instead of the pan, how we'd make them together on Sunday afternoons. Faith listens carefully, and then tells me about a teacher who encouraged her art in middle school, how this teacher let her stay after school to work in the art room when things were hard at home. We find this small common ground in people who showed up for us when they didn't have to, and the conversation flows easier than it has before. The next Tuesday, Faith's mother and I have our monthly call, and she brings up the idea of putting our basic agreements in writing. Not because we don't trust each other, she's quick to say, but because having clear expectations documented makes everyone feel safer. I agree, and we spend the next week emailing back and forth, drafting a simple agreement that covers the basics. I won't visit her school or show up unannounced anywhere. She'll share information about Faith's major life events and important updates. We'll figure out holidays one at a time without making assumptions about what future years will look like. The document ends up being 2 pages, boring and practical and exactly what we need. We meet at a notary office on a Thursday morning and both sign it, the notary stamping each page with her official seal. Walking out afterward, I fold my copy and put it in my wallet, this tangible proof that we're building something real and structured that protects everyone involved. A few weeks pass before my phone buzzes with a text from Faith. The message is short, just 3 words that make my chest tight. It was good. I stare at the screen for a full minute, fighting every urge to ask what she made or request photos or push for more details. I type back, "I'm really glad," and force myself to put the phone down without adding anything else. That night, Faith's mother calls and tells me Faith mentioned me twice this week, once to say the studio coordinator asked about family support, and once to tell her mother about a clay technique I might find interesting. The conversations weren't warm or emotional, just casual mentions like I'm becoming a normal part of her world instead of this huge, traumatic thing she has to process. Faith's mother says patience is working in ways I can't see from the outside, that Faith is talking about me without anger in her voice, and that's progress even if it doesn't feel like much. I thank her and we hang up and I sit on my couch feeling something close to hope for the first time in months. The warehouse job becomes my routine over the next 6 months, loading pallets and managing inventory spreadsheets and eating lunch with coworkers who know nothing about my complicated personal life. I show up for therapy every other week, and Hassan keeps pushing me on the pause protocol, making sure I'm actually using it instead of just memorizing it. I build a life that doesn't revolve around Faith, but has space carved out for her when she's ready, and slowly it starts feeling less like waiting and more like just living. Then Faith texts asking if I want to get coffee again, and this time there's no mention of a 30-minute limit or her mother coming along. We meet at the same downtown coffee shop on a Saturday morning, and she walks in looking less guarded than before, her shoulders relaxed under her jacket. We order our drinks and sit at the same corner table, and she asks me about my favorite bands growing up, and I tell her about the punk phase I went through in my last foster home. She laughs when I describe trying to dye my hair green with Kool-Aid, and it turning out orange instead, and then she tells me about her current playlist and how she likes working to instrumental music, because lyrics distract her. We talk about her ceramics class and the teacher who lets students stay late to finish projects, and I share stories about my warehouse coworkers and the guy who brings his dog to work every Friday. The conversation flows easier than it ever has before, jumping between topics without the heavy weight of our complicated history pressing down on every word. An hour passes, and neither of us mentions the time, and when we finally leave, she says, "See you," instead of goodbye, like we'll definitely do this again. The community studio sends out an email about their student showcase a month later, and Faith forwards it to me with a short message asking if I want to come, but please stay in the back and don't make it a big thing. I show up early and position myself against the rear wall where I can see but won't draw attention, and I watch Faith set up her display with 2 other students. The piece she's showing is smaller than the destroyed sculpture, but more detailed. A series of connected clay hands reaching toward each other without quite touching. When it's her turn to present, she steps up to the microphone and explains her concept about connection. And distance, about the space between people being just as important as the contact, and I stand there watching her confidence and thinking about how much she's grown in 6 months. After she finishes talking and steps back, she scans the small crowd until she finds me at the back, and we lock eyes for just a second. She gives me this tiny nod, barely noticeable to anyone else, and I nod back. It's not a hug or a declaration or some emotional breakthrough, just this quiet acknowledgement that we're both here and we're both trying. I stay for the rest of the showcase and then slip out before the reception, giving her space to celebrate with her studio friends without her complicated father hovering around. Walking to my car, I feel something settle in my chest. Not closure exactly, but acceptance that this slow, careful progress is what healing looks like for us, and maybe that's enough for now. That's my take on what happened. I know a lot of you will see it differently, and that is the best part. Leave your thoughts in the comments because I will be reading through them. Let's see how many different opinions show up this time.